Hello and welcome. I'm Abyss from Killjoy Gaming, and yeah, I'm a bit closer than I normally am. I know, but I have two announcements. One, we made it to 20 subscribers, and as such, I will be doing a video weekly. It won't always be a deck demo because Master Duel is expensive, but I will be doing a video every week now. So tune in on Fridays from now on to actually see my content. I don't know when I'm uploading, but I'm uploading on Friday. Second announcement, I am working on a Discord which will be open to the public as soon as we hit 30 subscribers. Yeah. Happy about that, but I have to do a video weekly now because I promised on my personal Discord that I would. Yeah, but without that out of the way, let's get into the deck demo for today. Now, this deck demo is very near and dear to me. Well, most of them are, because I have them on my profile, but this one was my second deck I built on my account. That being Grass Skulls, or as I like to call it, Bone Daddy. This is a 60 card grass deck, so my list will be higher than my normal list because, 60 cards. Now, if you're looking at the core of this deck, the URCP will be 210 to 270. For that being, you need at least 2 to 3 copies of Uni Zombie. I say Uni Zombie. 1 to 2 copies of Fairy Tale Snow. It's pretty much mandatory in a grass deck. 1 copy of Avenged Savior. I personally would do this, but it's not technically needed. It just helps you get more things in your graveyard when you have extra materials to get rid of. Next, we have 3 copies of Touch Grass, aka That Grass Looks Greener. It wouldn't be a 60 card grass deck without grass itself. So, usually you bait this out and make your opponent touch grass. Next up, we have the SRs. You are looking at about 390 SRCP. That being 3 copies of the Bone Daddy himself, the King of the Skull Servants. 3 copies of Grill Daddy, aka White Baking. 2 copies of Mezuki, 2 copies of Gozuki, and 3 copies of Left Arm Offering. Left Arm Offering is your easy ticket to That Grass Looks Greener, aka Touching Grass. You really need to bait out your opponent's Ash if you can help it so you can play out That Grass Looks Greener. And or Left Arm Offering, depending on your hand. Next, for the rare CP, we are looking at 270, which is 3 copies of White Prince, 3 copies of White Princess, and 3 copies of White Mare. We are maxing out on the Skull Servant names because we want Bone Daddy to be thick. I enjoy this deck. Next up, for the normal CP, we have a CP cost of 210 to 240. That being 3 copies of Skull Servant, 3 copies of Lady in White, and then 1 to 2 copies of Geonator Transversor. People might say this isn't mandatory, but when your opponent does not know how to zone place, it is very, very punishing. And where's my music? There it is. Back to Master Duel music tones. And my list, we are looking at a UR cost of 750. I know, it's extremely expensive, but it is a 60 card deck and there is quite a few staples in it. Next, we are looking at an SR cost of 690. This is by far my most expensive deck. I will not stop saying that. You're looking at a rare CP cost of 450 and a normal CP cost of 360. On to the deck profile. Beautiful deck profile. If you've made it this far, please let me know if you'd like me to stay in this corner or after the deck profile is done to move and make myself bigger. With saying that out of the way, let's get into the profile itself. We are running 3 copies of Skull Servant, the man, the myth, the legend. He may be a vanilla monster, but he is the OG joke card that made this deck a reality. And we are running 3 copies of him. Next up, we have 3 copies of Bone Daddy himself, King of the Skull Servants. The original attack of this card becomes the combined number of King of the Skull Servants and Skull Servants in your graveyard times 1000. This guy can get massive in this deck. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish one other King of the Skull Servant or Skull Servant from your graveyard to special summon it. This is a great way to do Geonator Transverser shenanigans, because you can have Geonator pointing at King of the Skull Servants and one of your opponent's monsters, swap them, and since your opponent does not have any Skull Servant or King of the Skull Servants in their graveyard, Bone Daddy drops to 0, and then you can destroy it with whatever monster you like, and then use his graveyard effect to bring him back to your side of the field, big and beefy once again. Next, we have 3 copies of White Mare. If this card becomes Skull Servant while in the graveyard, every Skull Servant past this point will have this effect. You can discard this card, then activate one of the following effects. Target 1 Skull Servant or White Mare in your graveyard, return it to your graveyard. Target 1 of your banished Lady in Whites or King of the Skull Servant, special summon it. This is great for getting back your banished Lady in Whites and or King of the Skull Servants, or just making King of the Skull Servant even bigger. Next, we have one of the vital combo pieces, White Prince. If this card is sent to the graveyard, doesn't matter from where, you can send 1 Skull Servant and 1 Lady in White from your hand and or deck to the graveyard. And then his other effect, you can banish 2 Skull Servants from your graveyard. Remember, everything past this point with White or Skull Servant in their name becomes Skull Servant in the graveyard. And this card from your graveyard, especially summon 1 King of the Skull Servants from your deck. And of course, this card names becomes Skull Servant. I am not going to say that from this point forward. If a level 3 or lower monster you control will be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can discard this card instead. If this card is sent to the graveyard, doesn't matter from where, you can add 2 monsters with different name from your hand except White Baking that are either Skull Servant or mentions it, then discard 1 card. You can only use this effect of White Baking once per turn. Usually you're going to be adding White Prince and whatever else you need, but sometimes you have everything you need, and then you can add 2 of your good cards. My favorite thing to do, and you will see this later, is I add a White Mare and a King of the Skull Servants and then pitch a Gozuki. More on that later. We are running 2 copies of Maxi. Maxi is just, hand traps. We need them. I'm not going to read it. Now for some of the weird things. Nemesis Flag. You can target 1 of your banished monsters except Nemesis Flag, especially in this card from your hand, and if you do, shuffle that target into the deck. During your main phase, you can add 1 Nemesis monster from your deck to your hand except Nemesis Flag. You can only use each of these effects once per turn. Your target for this will almost always be Nemesis Corridor. Unless you've milled all 3 of your Nemesis Corridor, and then in which case you are adding Nemesis Umbrella. More on that later. Next, we have 3 copies of Lady in White. Face up level 3 or lower zombie monsters on the field except Lady in White cannot be destroyed by battle. Also, they are unaffected by spell and traps. Move over, Sky Striker. Your effects are not targeting me today. Next, we have 2 copies of Uni Zombie. You can target 1 face-up monster on the field, discard a card, and if you do increase that targets by 1, this messes up synchro place for your opponent, but it also makes White Princess hurt all the more, a little bit more on that after this. And then this monster has another effect. You can target 1 face-up monster on the field. Monster you control cannot attack except for zombies monsters this turn. Also send 1 zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard, and if you do, increase the target's level by 1. You can only use each effect once per turn. This is great for getting White Princess out of your hand, Mizukis, Gozukis, and my favorite, getting White Baking out of your deck when you do not have grass. Next, we are running 3 copies of White Princess. This card becomes Skull Servant while in the graveyard. I'm reading so fast, I'm reading things I said I wasn't going to read. If this card is normal special summon, doesn't matter from where, you can send 1 White Prince from your deck to the graveyard, and then it has a quick effect. You can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard. All monsters currently on the field lose their attack and defense equal to their own level or rank, so this affects XC monsters too, times 300 until end of turn. It's great for getting rid of those pesky Exo Sisters when need be. Next, we're running 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Sing. Again, this is a hand trap. I'm not going to read its effect. Next, we are running 1 copy of Nemesis Umbrella. You can target one of your banished monsters except Nemesis Umbrella, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, shuffle that target into your deck. It's great for recycling your banished Skull Servants when you cannot get them back from the banish zone. And then you can target one of your Nemesis monsters in your graveyard except Nemesis Umbrella and add it to your hand. You can only use each effect Nemesis Umbrella once per turn. This is great for getting corridors out of the graveyard. Next, we're running 2 copies of Mizuki. You can banish the card from your graveyard and target 1 zombie monster in your graveyard and special summon that target. Great for getting Skull Servants out of your graveyard, and even the rare appearance of Doom King Baylor Drock. Because we are not running Zombie World in this, surprisingly. Because I did not feel like running that kind of package in this deck. Next, we're running 2 copies of Shiranui Solitaire. You contribute 1 zombie monster, special summon 1 zombie tuner with 0 defense from your deck, that being Uni Zombie. And that is the only effect that is relevant in this deck. Next, we're running 1 copy of Fairy Tale Snow. If this is normal special summon, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, changes to face non-defense position. This is great for stopping link decks and blanking your opponent, but also it can be summoned during the battle phase to get extra damage in if you need it. Then if this card is in your graveyard, quick effect, you can banish 7 other cards in your hand, field, or graveyard to special summon this card. Next, you're running 2 copies of Gozuki. During your main phase, you can send 1 zombie monster from your deck to your graveyard. This is just discount Uni Zombie, by the way. But it does have a little bit of perk. If this card is sent to the graveyard, doesn't matter from where, you can banish 1 zombie monster from your graveyard except Gozuki to special summon 1 zombie monster from your hand. You can only use each effective Gozuki once per turn. Next, we're running 3 copies of Nemesis Corridor. There is a very special reason for this. There's a card in our extra deck that can be special summoned off of Thunder monsters that can special summon themselves from the hand, that being Thunder Dragon Colossus. Since he has the same effect of the other Nemesis monsters, I am not going to read his effect because I almost never cycle banished Nemesis monsters. But let's read Thunder Dragon Colossus while we're here. Either must be fusioned or special summoned during a turn a Thunder monster effect was activated in the hand, aka Nemesis Corridor. Its ability to special summon itself. I can't talk. I'm spacing out. Alright, back to the card. Special summon during the turn the Thunder monster effect was activated in the hand by attributing 1 Thunder effect non-fusion monster, aka Nemesis Corridor. My bad for spacing out. And then it has the effect of cards cannot be added from the main deck to your opponent's hand except by drawing them. And if this card will be destroyed, you can banish 1 Thunder monster from your graveyard instead. So not only does it have protection when you use your Nemesis Corridor, it stops your opponent from adding cards from their hand. Goodbye, Fluonderies. Next, we are running 1 copy of Doom King Baylor Drock. During the standby phase, if there is a face-up card in the field zone, aka Fluonderies again, and this card is in your graveyard, you can special summon this card in defense position. You can only use the effect of Doom King Baylor Drock once per turn. Well, this effect, to special summon himself. Once per chain. When a zombie monster effect except for this card is activated, except during the damage step, quick effect, you can apply one of these effects. But you cannot apply the same effect again this turn. So, if they ash you, Doom King can negate it, or banish a monster from their field or graveyard. Usually you'll negate it, but if you activate a monster like your own Uni Zombie, you can banish a card from their field or graveyard. Now for the spells. We're running 1 hand destruction because our cards like to be in the graveyard, and a lot of time we can brick if we draw a lot of our graveyard synergistic stuff. You will see that in the first game. We are running 3 copies of Left Arm Offering. If you have 2 other cards in your hand, banish your entire hand, add 1 spell from your deck to your hand. You cannot set spell or traps the turn you activate this card. It kind of turns off our Imperms and Lost Winds, but getting grass is more important. You need your opponent to touch grass. Next, we're running 3 copies of Lure Darkness. Draw 2 cards and banish a dark monster from your hand, and if you do not have any in your hand, send your entire hand to your graveyard. This has pluses and minuses depending on the situation. Though a draw 2 is still a draw 2. Next, we're running 3 copies of that grass looks greener. If you have more cards in your deck than your opponent, you will almost certainly will send the top cards of your deck until you have the same number as your opponent. That's how we get so many cards in our graveyard. It's like hitting the jackpot when we play this card. We are running one copy of Lightning Storm cause I wanted as many different staples to call out as possible with the one copy of Crossout Designator. We almost never see them, but you know, it doesn't hurt to have a variety. While you control no face-up cards, activate one of these effects, destroy all attack monster your opponent controls, or destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. You can only activate one Lightning Storm per turn. Next, you're running one copy of Crossout Designator and one copy of Forbidden Droplet, followed by 3 copies of Lost Wind. This is a really odd card, but I prefer running 3 of them over some of the other stuff we could run, because it has an effect to target one special summon monster on the field, negate its effects, also the original attack is halved. And if a special summon monster from your opponent's extra deck while this card is in your graveyard, except during the damage step, you can set this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. Since we are playing grass and milling a lot of our decks, if a monster is special summoned from the extra deck, either your opponent, you can get it from your graveyard, which happens a lot, believe it or not. And then we are running 2 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Now for the extra deck. This mana has already been read, so we are going on to Vermilion Dragon Mech. I don't normally go into the extra deck as much, so I will talk about the ones that matter. Avenged Savior. This card becomes Revenger and Slayer while on the field. That effect does not matter, and you can only use the following effects of Avenged Savior once per turn. This effect does not matter, but during the damage calc, if this card battles an opponent's monster, quick effect, you send one zombie monster from your deck to the graveyard. Your opponent's monster loses attack equal to the level of the monster sent by 200 until the end of this turn. This is great for getting another White Baking if you have no other way to get White Bakings into the graveyard. Not to mention you can mill Gozukis for extra damage, or Mezukis for follow-up plays later. And then the only other card I really think matters, Geonator Transverser. This link card and monster at point 2 cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. If this card points to 2 monsters, you can switch control of those monsters. You can only use this effect Geonator Transverser once per turn. The Great Yoink, or I should say the Great Switcheroo. And with that out of the way, let's get into the replays. When Master Duel decides to catch up with us. This first match shows what happens when everything goes wrong. And I mean everything. Look at that beautiful field. I love Gear Town. Now we are opening up with a White Mare, a Fairy Tale Snow, a Nemesis Corridor. We'd rather keep Imperm, and we are fighting Dragon Link. And we draw pretty much no gas, which is not the greatest for us. And they are going to do normal Rockets shenanigans. We are going to reset the Lost Wind because they special summon. They're going to act Noctovision Dragon to special summon. We are going to imperm that Striker Dragon. We'd rather not have them have their field spell. And now, if our opponent's smart, they will play around the imperm column, but you know, not always happening. Now, I don't like banishing my entire graveyard, but I really don't want them to continue playing the game. They're going to activate Chaos Space, pitching a Rocket Monster, realizing it was in the Imperm column, then activating World Legacy Guard Dragon to get back their Rocket Tracer. They're going to use the Rocket Tracer to blow up their Striker Dragon, and then special summon another Rocket from deck. Then they're going to go into a second Striker Dragon, even though they have their Bootsecker launch already. Wait a minute. This thing has another effect. You can target one face-up monster you control and add one rocket monster in your graveyard. If you do destroy that monster... Oh, this has a secondary effect. While I wasn't paying attention, he went into Dolorous Dragon and did not decide not to attack over my monster for whatever reason. We drew into a Lost Wind. That is not gas, unfortunately. So we are going to attack into their Delirious Dragon, set a second Lost Wind, and hope we can make it through the turn. They flip their Noctovision, and they're going to crash their Noctovision. I still haven't figured out that one, even watching this replay now. They're going to add Rocket Tracer back, trigger Delirious Dragon's other effect, activate Rocket Tracer to blow up their or Legacy Guard Dragon to get another monster from deck, going for Silver Rocket Dragon, and then bringing back Delirious Dragon, banishing it from to get Borolo Dragon. I am worried, so I flipped up the last one. They're going to activate Borolo Dragon to reduce my monster's attack. I can't talk. And Chaos Space, banishing, getting Delirious Dragon back to the deck and drawing a card. And we drew gas for turn. All we do is pray they do not have Ash, and we make our opponent touch grass. Activating White Baking, White Prince, and White Prince. Now with their Borolo Dragon permanently negated due to Lost Wind, that's my favorite part about it, we're going to add a King of the Skull Servants and another White Prince, even though White Prince is not online due to our graveyard being maxed out on that. We are going to attack with a 12,000 attack Bone Daddy for game. That was a miracle draw scenario, I'm going to be honest. On to the second game. Now the second game will showcase what happens when we open grass. We're going to let our opponent go first. We are playing against Crystal Beast of all things. I know, these decks are... This one is kind of weird. Though I hope they have enough gas to actually get them to a amazing place, but you know... I can't be guaranteed on anything. They're going to special summon and end there. Now my goal is to bait out an Ash. So I'm going to normal summon Shiranui Solitaire, try to go for Uni Zombie. And there's the Ash Blossom. Since they've used Ash Blossom this turn, they cannot activate any more Ash Blossoms if they have it. So it's time to make our opponent touch some grass. We are going to trigger White Baking, White Prince, and White Prince, praying we have enough fodder to send from our deck to our graveyard. There's 2. There's 4. And here's the interesting thing. I've already normal summoned, but we have a Gozuki in our hand, which I can send off of White Baking. Use Gozuki's effect to banish Lady in White to special summon King of the Skull Servants. Special summon back Lady in White, making King of the Skull Servants immune to spell and trap effects and hitting in for well over lethal. Now this final game is against Exo Scissors, which is a terrible matchup. What to make matters worse though is I don't actually summon King of the Skull Servants this game. Even though we pulled grass, this hand is full of gas for me. We're going to start by activating Glory of Darkness. We want to get that Skull Servant out of our hand. They're going to activate Maxi. That's fine. I don't really care about Maxi. Because all we need is one turn to do lethal. We're going to banish the Skull Servant. Activate that grass looks green. Hit a White Baking and a Gozuki. We're going to banish the Ash Blossom that we can no longer use from our graveyard. They are going to Called by the Grave, White Baking of all things. And since they called by White Baking, Gozuki goes through, and I get to special summon Doom King Baylor Drock. Now this man is mean. They are going to imperm the Uni Zombie, but they are about to learn that Doom King just needs a zombie monster to activate an effect for it to be able to banish a card from the field or a monster from field or graveyard. Doesn't matter if the effect goes through. Now I probably could have pushed for more damage, but it's very interesting to see where this goes. They're going to Pot of Prosperity. I have no response to that. They have Compulse, Armament, and Called By. They're going to go for the Armament because they want to play 4 Spell and Trap. That is, dangerous. We drew Nemesis Corridor for turn. We're going to activate the Nemesis Corridor, reshuffle that white Baking They Banished, and go into a Thunder Dragon Colossus. They're going to compulse said. Oh no, they're going to compulse Doom King Baylor Drock. I always forget that. I always think they're going to compulse the fusion monster of all things. They're going to go for Valdis so they can get a monster. Baylor Drock goes back to my hand. Uni Zombie is going to change the level of that. They're going to Valdis. I'm going to pitch the Mizuki, actually, and not Baylor Drock, even though it would be nice to have him in my graveyard. They're going to Armament, changing their Irene into a Xyz monster into Macallus, I think it is. I can never pronounce these names sometimes. I'm going to send another Gozuki to the graveyard, banish a Solitaire, and then activate Lost Wind because they really don't want this Baylor Drock to stay on the field. I'm gonna Snow here, banishing 7 spells that I milled off of grass. They're gonna try and banish Baylor Drock. I'm going to activate Infirm for a chain 4. Negate their banishing. Gonna go into Snow. They're gonna go into their other Xyz. I'll activate Snow to flip the thing. They're gonna activate in response to negate Baylor Drock. They really don't want this man on the field to do his effect again. But then we're gonna go into watch your zone placements, Geonator Transverser. Take their monster, give them mine. Get Baylor Drock back with Mizuki. Get Gozuki back with Mizuki, because I haven't activated the first effect of Gozuki. Then activate Gozuki's effect and Baylor Drock's effect to banish their face down monster. And they're gonna scoop it up there. So when this deck goes off, it goes off. But we don't always get the best of luck. Hence the world of a 60 card deck. So if you liked what I did today and would like to see more, please check back again next Friday. And I thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.